Hello, everybody. Apologies for the technical difficulties we're experiencing. If you give us a few minutes, we're just going to get ourselves set up. So I'm going to put the theme tune on, and by the time the theme tune is over, we will be with you. So bear with us, and we'll be with you very shortly indeed.
Silent all around the line. If they get the chance, they were born in bloody circumstance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. Underground, given room to breathe, not but be drowned. So die if you get the chance. Better men than you've been, let this dance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. Seen the worst, and there is nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby podcast brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog. We are limping into this episode very much like Scotland limped to their defeat against Ireland. You see what I did there? It's almost like this was planned and not in any way a complete shambles. Good evening, everybody, anyway. If you're watching us live, we are on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. You can also listen back to us on any of the places you get audio podcasts. Something happened to the audio podcast last week. We don't know what. I think, Craig, this is all a D4 conspiracy.
I think the world rugby stroke Irish rugby, who are all in the same building, stroke the referee union, all get on, along with this, the Irish fans have come in and tried to keep us off the air, Cammy, because we're telling the truth.
That's right. We are the InfoWars of world rugby. Here to sell you suspect protein shapes and land some truth bombs on you. Ian, did you know? Here's a fun fact. How many points did Ireland score at the weekend?
36.
They did score
Well,
36.
I mean, at just rugby union, or
No, they
was
scored
there
36
kind of
points.
division of
Ireland,
Eurovision Song Contest on?
no, just this weekend in the rugby. Okay, so they scored 36 points. Do you know how many times the word Satan appears in the book of Revelations?
I mean, it does sound like sexton. Is that some kind of?
Well, there you go. 36, 30 sexton, you see.
But he didn't score all of them, so therefore that's where the book falls down on all its.
They still scored 36 points, which is still the same number of times that the word Satan appears in the book of Revelations. And if you're not ready to accept that truth, Ian, then you're beyond help.
I can't believe you can't own your own truth, Ian.
What was the title of that Mannix album? This is my truth, tell me yours. There you
go.
I don't think that was about the Irish defocking over World Rugby, though.
Well, clearly you can't read subtext.
If you listen to the Holy Bible backwards, it actually predicts that Italian teams will be allowed into the Pro 14 in later years. It predicts the collapse of Border Reivers and Celtic rugby.
Mm.
There's too much for Richie to bear.
Yeah. You know, Richie Mannix was carving into his arm was about the future of the Dragons.
No, he said what he wanted for Scotland's professional rugby was 4 teams.
That's it. Four teams, yeah.
4 teams.
Yeah, I remember
he ran out of time.
I remember the 11th commandment of "Thou shalt not pepper thou's team with those that are not from thou country."
Stop. I'm making fun of an icon here, and it's not
Yeah.
on. I apologise to all Mannix fans. I'm a disgrace. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're big Mannix fans on this podcast, so that's not, we say it because we love it. Anyway, look, we've got a lot to cover. Poor Rory is still out there somewhere on the internet, like Vision. I imagine Rory's a bit like Vision in the Marvel films, where he has to disappear and exist only on the internet so he doesn't get found by Ultron. That's where Rory is right now. He's too scared about that by joining this podcast he's going to be somehow corrupted, so he's fled online somewhere. He's trying to join us at some point.
Yeah, that's the thing, like he's trying to connect to the internet, but he's in the Highlands, so he can't get connected to the internet. That's part of the issue. He's off the grid. Rory's off the grid.
That's it. He says he's rebooting at the minute. We talk about it. He's literally rebooting.
All right, cool. So
I just thought he was just using his compost toilet and his cardboard compost toilet, being in a bag, basically.
Is that what they call it when you have to recharge your compost? Rebooting. I'm rebooting my compost toilet.
He's busy cycling his cycle to get the electricity sorted so he can actually come in the pod.
Getting some more roughage down there just to smell. Is that how he is from Inverness. I mean, let's not rule out the fact that he's got a composting toilet. I don't think they've got full flush yet, have they, up there?
No. They're not in the mains water. They just let the water roll through the house, and they just use the facilities, and their stream will take it away.
Gravity will do its job.
Exactly. And then there's a tourist further down the stream saying this water tastes so fresh. Sorry,
I just want to point out for everybody who's listening to this and not watching it, because there's only like 17 people watching it. Throughout that whole disgraceful slagging of Inverness, I was eating some pasta that Rona had made. So I do not agree with these opinions of Inverness.
I thought you were saying you were struggling to eat your pasta while me and Craig were talking about jobbies.
Oh no, man! God, do you know how? Man, you're talking irritable bills for decades here. Decades.
And for those that haven't got Patreon, this is just a wee taster for you.
We've got an excellent pun coming already on the podcast. Alan McDonald joins us, friend of the podcast, long-time listener, not a first-time caller. Says the Renegade Masters win the D4 damage to the power of the people. That is a niche reference, Alan. Fair play. So, look, we've got a couple of two big talking points tonight. One, I think what I'd like to do is we're going to talk about the WX2 Scotland women versus South Africa at the end of the podcast. Right, we're going to end on a positive note and preview that match. I think what we need to do though is roll up our sleeves and put on some latex gloves and plunge our hands into the rotting flesh and the dead corpse of Scotland's World Cup. Craig and Ian. No,
I think, Cammy, last time when we had to do this ourselves, I think it was just the two of us.
it's me and you two, and nobody would turn up, Ian.
Yeah. I think you opened with Sound of Silence.
I
We can
did.
do it now
Hello,
for
hello,
copyright
darkness, my old friend.
Leeds. I mean, we could. I was thinking we could.
In
vote
fact,
with that.
this is going to be a sad thing, but like this. I remember listening to that.
I cheered everybody up at the end of that podcast by doing my own version of Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire."
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yes, you did. Yeah, I remember that too.
Also, was that not the one that got Stephen Jones to write the?
Was that the
that's
Stephen Jones wrote review on our
might
iTunes?
Because we thought to cheer ourselves up. I was like, I found this excerpt about Mr. Jones on Wikipedia, which I didn't. Like I said, I didn't write it, so I don't know why he blocked me. I just read it out because I thought it was really funny that he should be shot in the face with a bullet made of his own excrement. Somebody was obviously annoyed with him, which wasn't me. Just read it.
And he left us a 1-star review on
the
iTunes.
messenger. Well, you know what? I'll leave him a 0-star review if I could.
Yeah,
I just
that was
want
a
the
good
review.
That was a good pod. This feels slightly different though, Craig. And I don't know which way around we should do it. I kind of feel like let's talk about the game first, and then the autopsy of Scottish rugby afterwards.
Okay.
This feels to me different from Japan. I think we could write that World Cup off on, that island. I mean, it feels slightly. Well, I actually think it feels the same as that Ireland defeat in 2019. I think the Japan game you can write off by going, well, look, they beat Ireland, and actually it was their home World Cup. They're up for it. They've kind of got a once in a generation talent, and we tried to sue a typhoon. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this feels slightly different in that
we weren't suing it. We were seeking legal advice.
We were seeking legal advice about the typhoon. That's very. Let's be accurate here.
It, it could be compensation or just not suing it. That's different.
We weren't suing it. We were merely seeking legal advice from Lionel Hutt's sports attorney at law.
Mark Dawson's go-to guy.
Rory's joined us. Hello, Rory.
Good evening.
You join us as we talk about suing typhoons.
Suing typhoons. I heard what you were talking about a minute ago, though, because I have an iPad to keep myself up to speed, so I don't just come crashing in like Manson halfway through an episode and not know what's been disgracefully slandered the north of Scotland and our composting toilets. I was quite entertained to think that you think I'm that level of eco warrior that I would have such a composting toilet, but.
Anyway, Craig, back to the point I was making. I think this
quick move on.
We're saying let's focus on the game first, and we do the autopsy of the whole Scottish rugby afterwards. So, to a certain extent, Craig, I think this Ireland loss feels very much the same as the last Ireland loss. Is that I don't know that we left a lot out on the field because we didn't look, apart from the two breakaway tries, we never looked like we were in the game at all.
No, that's. Sorry, Masai is saying everything. I think it just we didn't even fire a shot, and okay, we got 2 tries. Oh, we got 2 tries, and we got but yeah, this World Cup, I felt we were more positive, and we went in, I think, with a lot more hope, and I think we had been buoyed by results in the Six Nations and being fifth in the world and feeling good, and we had a bit of strut on, and we were kind of owning that strut. I think this is more of a the Ireland game for me. The South Africa game was kind of like, well, okay, fair enough. We kind of thought we might lose that one, so don't worry about it. This one is very much almost somebody's just taken Ireland has taken a knife to our tires, and absolutely just we've walked out and going, oh no, not again. And it's just, I just feel it's been an absolute. We're excited. We're looking forward to it. At least we thought, well, if we lose it, I think we talked about it last week. If we fire some shots and we lose it, then at least we've fired some shots. And we just went back to our type that everybody likes, all the other nations like to rub on our faces, that we just didn't turn up. And we showed a mental weakness at the weekend. And
I was watching the press conference with Gregor Townsend and Jamie Ritchie, and before we came on air, and one of the questions to Gregor Townsend was, were you disappointed with Finn for not taking the 3 points early on when we're getting penalties in their 22, particularly after the first Ireland try? And Townsend said, well, no, because looking back on the game, that wouldn't have made any difference. But in terms of momentum and in terms of keeping the scoreboard ticking over, Ireland coming away from their own 22 with Scotland having scored 0 points despite putting a lot of pressure on is going to be a big confidence boost compared to Scotland going in and getting the penalties, sticking 3 on the board and keeping some pressure on.
Just make sure our mic was on there. Yes, obviously there was the whole thing in the back of the mind. We need to win by 8 points. We need to score tries. We need to win by 8 points. But momentum is, like you said, vital. And obviously with our shaky line out, and we know Ireland are good at that kind of thing. Take those 3 points. You've got an excellent restarter, either in Kinghorn or Russell. If Kinghorn's feeling like he was fit to do it at that time, he was still on the pitch. And then try to work from there. Another thing I found quite surprising was, even when we went to the corner, not to try and maul first up. Just at it because we got quite deep in. I think it was maybe like 12 metres in, maybe even closer. And it was just a quick. I think Gray was at the front, took it down, quick out. And took a lot of carry decently, but given how many tries hookers have scored recently, I thought we'd maybe, at least try and test them out, because the maul has worked recently well. But I think we should have taken those 3 points, and then especially when the second one came up shortly after second penalty that was in kickball range, should have at least knocked one over, just because it was still early doors.
I want, and the other thing, Roy, I don't want to be. There were a handful of not even a handful. There were a couple of what ifs in that game. Finn's much disputed 50-22 that was clearly caught in touch. This Irish. I've had lots of people in our Twitter mentions microscopically analysing whether or not a boot hovered over a line or was on it, even though earth scrapes up from it.
Yeah,
it's almost like I think there's been less analysis on JFK's assassination than there has been on that Irish boot on the line, even though they won the bloody game. I think the way I almost think that got into Scottish heads a little bit, that was such a momentum killer, because Alan booted it back up and all of a sudden we'd lost quite significant territory. And I'm not sure mentally how well Scotland handled the game. When Finn ended up as captain, I've seen a couple of people saying, he handled the referee very well, but actually he came over as fairly petulant at times, I thought.
Well, he was probably, by the time he was having to make serious points to the referee, the game was gone, and there wasn't much that he could do about it. The first 17 minutes, I think all the what ifs really are in there. Anything that kind of comes after that, you'd let the game go by that point. I think the points that you've touched on already, that the 3 kickable penalties, that's potentially a 9-5 lead. I'm sure we'll talk about the TMO at some point and how
when we put our trust in Nick Berry.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really, realistically, it was actually a few minutes later when they scored their second try to make it 12-0. That was, I think, when Ireland were starting to look really dominant. Scotland were looking like they were making mistakes. Ireland were looking like they weren't making any. Actually, if you look at those first kind of quarter of an hour, Ireland were giving away penalties. The luck was falling in both directions. But after that, I think, the thing that they say about the perceived dominant team gets a little bit more of the rub of the green. Certainly, it felt that way watching it the first time, and it was a little bit like that the second. But I don't think Scotland were quite as unlucky as you perceived them in the pub on a Saturday night. They probably were architects of their own downfall for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder, Craig, that we've talked in the past that Scotland are too honest, and I think I would not even argue. I'd say Ireland cheated during the match, but in a way that great teams cheat at rugby. They bend the rules. They stretch it as far as they can take it with a referee. So all the greatest teams in the history of rugby are cheats and have cheated repeatedly. Richie McCaw never knowingly on side and all of that. You look at, particularly the first Ireland try and even the second to a certain degree. What Ireland do is they send in two forwards together as dummy runners, but because of where they target it, it causes an obstruction, and by the letter of the law, it's an obstruction. But because of the way they run and because of where they target with it, it's not something the officials pick up because they're very clever about how they do it and where they do it. So although it's cheating and it breaks the rules, it's cheating in the way all the greatest teams have done and have won World Cups by doing.
Yeah, it's little things, and I've always said you play the whistle and you deal with it. You deal with the referee you get, and that's the way it is. But I'm going to throw that all out the window because I've decided I've had enough of this. And you look at that. I think it was the first try, and there was a glimpse of on the TV of Ty Byrne blocking George Turner for that first try, and they run it, and he was properly blocking him. So that wasn't picked up because basically I'm about to just fire one off on the TMOs. By the way,
good.
Andrew Porter. Now Andrew Porter went for a turnover ball in their 22, right in front of the cameras. The cameras had a beautiful picture of it, where his hands went down onto the floor. He then scooped back, picked the ball up, and penalty. It's penalty to Ireland. Brilliant. There you go. And all the pundits, what a fantastic turnover from Porter. It's absolutely and utterly illegal. And where this is, again, we seem to
find... Park that one later as well. Sorry, just to add.
Yeah. So for me, Scotland then decided to start getting in the cheating, but unfortunately that was Schumann putting somebody over the advertising hoardings and Ollie Smith chipping Johnny Sexton. It's like we're almost like the lad that turns up to school with the wrong trainers on, the wrong fashion trainers or something. We just always seem to, we can cheat too. Look at us cheating, and it's like, no, seriously, you boys need to get back to it and try and learn again. They were constantly in the ruck. They had hands in the ruck. They had bodies lying everywhere. And because we don't get Northern Hemisphere referees at the World Cup, we get Southern Hemisphere referees. We are getting poor poor decisions because the southern hemisphere referees do not police the ruck as much as we police the ruck up in the northern hemisphere.
Was
But-
Wayne Barnes running one of the touchlines?
He was, yes.
Yeah, but he's not going to pick up what's happening on the ruck.
Right, what I think should be happening, maybe a hot take, because I mean, was it somebody said like 92% of breakdowns or something have some kind of illegal activity going on?
Yeah.
Do we need to have more officials look at stuff?
There's
Because I think
been-
we spend
there's-
so much time on TMO nonsense. I might get to the England Samoa thing and hands in the ruck because that was just nonsense, as well as the ones in our game. But the amount of time they've got all the technology there and they're making wrong decisions. Maybe do we not just need to have one straight arbiter of the game? So you look at NFL, right? I'm not a big fan of NFL. People seem to love that nonsense. And they've got hundreds of officials. And they throw their little flags on the play and they go, right, this guy was doing that. Cool. Right. You fell first, so what he did to that guy after doesn't count. That might even speed it up more than 3 minutes of, was it Brian McNeese looking at, the Samoan 13 hand went between the two England players' hands and then touched it slightly forward, which went on forever.
But the thing is, Ian, I don't mind how many referees or how little referees we've got. I just want consistency.
Yeah.
And it's just the consistency that's the problem.
There were I counted when I was watching back the highlights before we came on, and there were 3 or 4 times in the run up to a couple of the Irish tries where we had hands on ball in the ruck, and it would have it would have been blown up for Ireland as a turnover or as a penalty. There were 3 or 4 times that we were not being given the same time on the ball at the ruck that Ireland were. And as you said, Craig, it's just consistency. If that's the way to go, you can't say blow up for penalty for what Porter did, and then I think it was Schumann was right over the ball on our try line just before one of the Irish tries, and was clearly very cleanly on the ball as well, and yet no penalty is played on because it's so I there's a lot of.
Was that the third try?
I think it's a third try, yeah.
Yeah, because I've got my notes here. Third try, clear in at the sides from McCloskey.
The forward pass as well.
Oh yeah, there was a forward pass. I remember
There
that
was
as
a
well.
forward,
Yeah.
the pass that started to move off was forward. We popped that down the blind side. The fourth try, they never even checked the grounding, which was ridiculous. As the
He clearly held up.
Unless there was a giant gap
He
with
slid in miles
where he
before
was
the
that you
line.
see the ball.
And Doohan, was it Doohan and Matt Fagerson that were with him?
Both clearly underneath him. When there was a replay of it on the high. They didn't show the grounding. They never showed the ground in any of the replays. Which, I mean, we've talked about that before on the Patreon pod. That this World Cup has been atrocious for that. You get on the Six Nations where they'll show you get to see what the TMO is showing. They spend time looking at it. You get an understanding of how a decision's been made. But they've got no idea because they're just saying, we're just leaving it to the TMO to make a little decision in his little shed out the back. We're not going to tell you how he's come to that decision. We just trust Nick Berry. Trust that Nick Berry's heard the guy in his ear say it's not that try is clearly held up.
So I think just for also our Welsh and Irish friends listening at the moment, don't worry, we will get to the point that Ireland absolutely deserve to batter us. But at the moment, we're just
we won't. When are we doing that? When are we doing that? You're on your own there.
In the Patreon bit.
In the Patreon bit, they'll have to pay. You have to pay £3 a month
to be nice to you.
pay for us
You're
to
all
be.
a bunch of cheats.
Yeah, you have to pay the money to hear me name the players that I'm very, very disappointed in. I'm not angry, just disappointed.
Man, you screwed my fantasy rugby team. It was already crap. Then you went and made it worse.
I think. I mean, I keep coming back to. I think Scotland were outcoached rather than outplayed. I don't think that there was a lot of effort and endeavour on Scotland's part. It didn't necessarily go anywhere, but I think that we were outthought and outcoached by Andy Farrell.
I would agree with that. Possibly not Andy Farrell, possibly just Squidge.
Squidge. It's
Yeah.
Squidge's
Has he
fault now, Rory.
He's been watching
Yeah.
Squidgy's videos. That's what the problem is.
Yeah, I reckon they have, because all the Squidge videos where he goes on about Scotland's boot shape and the wonderful kind of where Sione is first receiver, Finn suddenly sneaks in the back and he's behind him, and you can pop back, and then Sione has the option, he can carry it on, or he can pass it to Finn, or he's got a man either side. There's like 3 or 4 of them that you can go to, and if you actually watch that, I think it was the second. No, it wasn't a try. Obviously, it was during those phases of
Third
Scotland
failure.
attack. I actually sat and paused it. I took screenshots, but I don't think you can do screenshots on here.
Sam Larnold did one as well.
And your YouTube will get taken down anyway. But they hit the boot shape, and Sione had the ball, and the Ireland defence were just sitting off them because they've watched Squidge's video, and you know that he has multiple options, so they're actually waiting. They're confident enough to wait and see what happens with the ball. As soon as the ball goes back out to Finn, Hugh goes through the line past Sexton, who basically just steps out the way and lets him run through the line because he knows he's not going to be in. And then there's like 4 Ireland guys just immediately turn and sprint out, which means that when the ball goes out to whoever it was, I think it ended up with Darcy. Scotland at the start were at 6-on-5 attacking with the ball. By the time Darcy gets the ball on the wing, it was like 5 defenders on 1. And they just, so the things that Squidge was pointing out that Scotland were fooling people with, they're not fooling with them with anymore.
No, but that's because we've got one idea that we execute
Possibly.
well now and again, and I think that's the problem with Scotland is we don't have anything more than a plan A. There's no. We may occasionally have a plan B, but there's nothing beyond that.
Yeah,
and that's what
that move is becoming like our Sexton loop. Everyone knows
Yeah.
it's coming. Actually, I thought the best kind of attacking first phase stuff was when Sione got the ball and just went hard at the line, went hunting for Sexton to try and run over him, and we actually made a bit of ground doing that.
Yeah, I think also that I'm disappointed in the forwards. I think the forwards, first things first. Your professional rugby players, get your line out sorted out. This is ridiculous because this is now how many? It must be a year and a half that we've had issues with our line out. Second of all, they're now at a stage. People know that Scotland work on turnovers with Jamie Ritchie, especially when Hamish Watson was about, Rory Darge. So they're protecting their forward ball when they're doing closer moves. They've got far more protection from their second and third ruck players. So you're getting to this point where they're not getting their hands to the ball. The Jamie Ritchies, the Rory Darges aren't getting their hands to the ball because they're negating them now. They've negated them. They've negated Finn Russell. Finn wasn't. Where was all the chip kicks, the grubber kicks, the kicks over the head to Darcy or to Duhan? None of that was happening on the weekend because it's either being coached out of them, or it's no longer in the plan. It's almost like that first half against England where Finn was constrained, and then all of a sudden he goes, right, okay, I'm actually going to go out and do this my own way, and it just seems like we're almost like coaching a Finn style now rather than actually just letting them get on with it. So and everyone that comes up against us is kind of, well, anybody who's a coach is going to coach their defence to hit just as you say, Rory, hit Finn, hit Sione, and hit Hugh Jones.
I think the other thing that and Duhan was an interesting one at the weekend because one thing that they did with the Lions and Scotland have done really well is to have Duhan chasing the kickoff. But just because the thought of kind of Duhan running you down as you think, but he lacked a bit of commitment. I thought he was all into it, but then he'd just slow up and give them plenty of time to kick the ball up. So there was no disruption at all. Whereas if he'd actually gone up and just smashed the guy a couple of times, he had the opportunity to do it, but he didn't. So I don't know if there's everybody just seemed a little bit off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And not sure of what they were supposed to be doing or where they were, or they're getting themselves into tight situations and not being able to make the right decisions or execute what they're supposed to be doing. And
They're
that
not
comes
finished-
back to me as it's a coaching problem.
They're not finished 9 turnovers to 3.
Yep.
Excluding penalties. I think as well.
We could probably get that up to 6.
Given
We
that
could probably get that up to 6 on Scotland. Should have had 6 if we really criticise the TMOs, but it's still. I don't think we can put that all on the. We can't put all of this on Nick Berry.
Turnovers
Oh,
conceded
no, I thought-
8-7,
8-7.
according to the official stats.
Yeah, we had a couple of steals. It's just that nothing came of
Rory
it.
Darch got a
That's
couple of really good ones. It's like Darch had one of these. I don't know. It looked like he was making an impact to begin with, and then there was a couple of cheap penalties, which switched momentum. But it was the same old, wasn't it? Really.
I think one thing for me though, I think we have to kind of accept is that Blair Kinghorn going off early disrupted Scotland's game plan
Especially
because
since the bench.
But
you
can say that's down to the coach because he picked that bench. That
he picked Ollie Smith to come in off the bench, but I think that's because he was relying on the fact that you would get 80 minutes off Blair Kinghorn and that Ollie Smith was only ever going to be there a break glass in case of emergency option.
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes undone, is if you have to break that glass in the first 10, 50 minutes of a game, then the whole game, because Scotland's attack is built off Blair Kinghorn occasionally coming in the line of attack and offering himself up as a first or second receiver occasionally. We saw that against it was the Tonga game. We scored that early try that was disallowed, but I think that's so to then have. So I think it threw off Scotland's defensive shape at the back because you bring on kind of a fairly inexperienced international. What's a really key big match, and also I think it threw Scotland's attack off because Ollie Smith wasn't really coming into the attacking line, and nor would you want him to because again it's his first international. Well, not his first international, his first kind of proper big international. So I think. I don't know what the other option would have been because it would have been putting Harris on the bench, presumably, and then having to shuffle the pack about even more. And I'm not necessarily sure there was another option there.
Kilsane. Kilsane could play inside centre and wing. You could put Hugh Jones to fullback.
or Darcy.
But that's is Hugh Jones at fullback any better than Ollie Smith at fullback?
No, but it offered more options because if Finn Russell had gone off injured, Kinghorn could have moved into 10. If you're going to go 6-2, you can have Kinghorn moving into 10. Then if you've got Stain or Jones, if you're starting Jones, you've got Stain. You can switch them about, or if Kinghorn gets injured, you can just swap one or about. I don't think. But just picking Ollie Smith, who is essentially a 15, because that's how we ended up with George Horn on the wing.
Yeah.
I don't think especially fullback on the bench is a wise option if you're going a 6-2. You want somebody more versatile. I mean, would you even? But I think in the Stuart Hogg days, I would say you'd start Stuart Hogg and you put Kinghorn at 23 because then you've got a guy who can play test level, fullback, wing, and
fly
half allegedly.
I'll say it for you.
Yeah. I think that the whole 6-2 and the 5-3, 5-3, 5-3-6, for me, it didn't really matter as such. What happened though is, if you look at Smith, for example, he came on as a 15. Now that's absolutely fantastic, and he's doing a great job for Glasgow. But you've brought someone on who makes silly mistakes, doesn't pass the ball when he's running through. He had several options to pass the ball at times when he was running, but he cut inside and went himself, then gets turned over. It's little things like that when we're playing a quality team like Ireland, and yes, Cammy, I did say quality team, unfortunately. We can't do these things anymore. We can't, we got to a point we've realised that Finn Russell wasn't going to save us. So then we had players deciding, well, right, okay, I'm going to do this myself now. And that whenever that happens, that's when the ball starts getting turned over and we get tries scored against us. Hugh Jones fell smack bang into the old Hugh Jones of old, where he couldn't defend against a toddler. He was I thought he was absolutely honking as a defending on the weekend. So I just we've really celebrated a psychologist coming into the Scotland team, and I really do think it's been we've seen a huge difference in the Scotland team. But my problem is just they seem to reset every so often. They seem to reset and have an absolute honking game that they go back to their old selves again. And I think it's just poor.
I know. I mean, and I think there's a point in that, Craig. And I really hope that they don't look at this and go, "Oh, sports psychologist wasn't the answer. Let's bin it." I think it is the answer. I think they need to look really deeply what happened at the weekend. And I think, Rory, one of the, we talk about Ollie Smith, the trip on Sexton in a game like that is just as funny as what happened afterwards was, right? And let's not get away from that. And Schumann probably should have had a red card for pushing him over the Hordens, but it was still funny, right? It's only funny because he didn't get injured, but it's still funny. Yeah. The trip itself that kicked all that off was fairly brainless. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll learn from it, and yeah, you don't want to blame him. Ollie Smith's not the reason we lost, and et cetera, et cetera. But you just absolutely cannot do that kind of stuff in a game like this.
I think so. Sexton's kicked the ball. Sorry.
I'll carry on.
Sexton kicked the ball forward to waste time.
He did.
It was petulant.
It was petulant, but that's the problem. Is he? If you're going to then make it look like you're going to try and get the ball back, you need to do a better rather than trip somebody. You need to be cuter about it. It was far too blatant, Rory.
Sorry, cable's gone a bit wonky. Yeah, I think it was unnecessary. What followed was unnecessary. Without wishing to bang on against the TMO was trying to get Xander Ferguson a card, even though he was over at the halfway line jogging across or walking across gently. It was sort of funny, and then it finished, and then Omani came out with, I don't know, presumably some epic slagging for Duhan that kicked it all off again. But yeah, as you say, and as Craig said, the errors that Smith was making are errors you can make in big European games or Glasgow games or autumn internationals. You're supposed to have learned that lesson by the time you get to essentially a World Cup knockout game. You should be picking guys. Kyle Stain's not going to trip him. Chris Harris wouldn't trip him. Which, Smith was far from the only one who didn't have a great day. But as you say, when Ireland are playing that well, and Ireland were playing very well, we had a chance to rattle them in the first sort of 20 minutes. We didn't take it. From there on, they were basically in control of everything. Even when we scored those two kind of tries, I think even when their bench were on, the scoreboard was out of sight. And I think if that the team that Ireland finished with, if that had been on the whole pitch, it would have been a different story. But yeah, for whatever reason, when Sexton and Peter O'Mahony are on the park, we just don't seem to be able to dent them psychologically. And starting sandbags is not how it doesn't work. It's like it used to be with the All Blacks and the Haka. If you disrespect the Haka, they'll destroy you in the first 10 minutes. If you front up to the Haka, they'll destroy you in the first 10 minutes. There is no, like, you can't. You can see from the comments that Omani came out with after the game that wind them up, but winding them up doesn't work in the way that we seem to think it works. Certainly not with a team like Ireland.
According to the Irish Daily Mirror, Johnny Sexton had the last laugh, not over Scotland, but over this podcast specifically.
Scottish Rugby podcast.
Specifically, that was headline news in Ireland. Genuinely, was Scottish Rugby podcast will regret this tweet. That was.
But they said it aged poorly or something.
Aged poorly.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure everything we've done in the last 2 weeks has been designed to age poorly.
It has been, yeah. Exactly.
It has aged like milk.
Yeah.
There's we talk about the Smith thing and this and that. There's two big mistakes that were that happened before the match, and that is we didn't pick Chris Harris because Chris Harris is someone who's been there, seen that, done that. He would have helped change that game if there was any changing to be done. Don't get me wrong. Ireland were absolutely supreme, and I can't really take much. I'm trying to take much away from them, but you can't really take much away from them. But also, where did Ali Price come from? We've been playing Ben White and George Horn, and if you want to put the Irish off somehow, you start George Horn. But
Actually, page 3 for my notes here. I was like, we're playing at Ireland's hands with Price at 9. They know what they're getting.
Yeah.
They've not had Ben White off, and they've not had Horn. And also, I think with Ireland, we know how effective they are in attack. And as much as we love the Huey Pilotu nickname and stuff, this is a horses for courses game. And like you said, Hugh Jones had a bad defensive game. This is where you pick Chris Harris. He defends that 13 channel better than anyone, and that's where they're going to go.
He organises the defence as well.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was just saying the first try they did go. I mean, Jones wasn't in that channel. It was Grant Gilchrist, but it was that 13 channel. That was where they got, I think, probably 2 tries out of attacking that space.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know what was going on in Tooney's head. I really don't. And last thing from me about the whole chat. Don't give me any of the usual rubbish about Blair Kinghorn. Blair Kinghorn cost us that match by saying that we're going to beat them and this. What is he meant to say when he's asked the question?
He's meant to use the subtleties of language.
But Rory, we've been begging these players to show a bit of oomph, to show a bit of their personality, not to fight against the SRU system of making them answer the same question, answer the same way to all the questions that they're asked. The first time they put their head over the parapet, okay, it aged like milk. Yep, totally understand. But they've now got Scotland fans taking Blair Kinghorn apart again. What's that guy to do? He would drive down the road and let a boy out of a junction, and he'd probably give him the finger.
I thought it was magnificent. I want more of that. I think we should. That's Ireland have spent their lives doing that, and then saying other people, gaslighting other people, and saying we never said that, you did. But the Welsh and English are quite happy to back themselves up. I don't see why we shouldn't. It gives an edge. It makes us more interesting. What I did love, I really hope that Blair Kinghorn took this from our Twitter feed, but that he ran out on the pitch for his 50th cap at the same time as Omani, and then soaked up the applause as if it was for him and him alone. What a magnificent! That is absolute. That's what we suggested he did, and that is absolutely what he did, which is marvelous.
All hail the king,
50
baby.
equals 100.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. I want more of this. I want more of this. More of this from Blair Kinghorn, please.
Yeah, I'm not saying that he shouldn't back himself. Obviously, they're going to say they will want to win, but you could just put a little word in there that doesn't say
we intend to end that.
To do. Yeah, we would love to. Yeah. You could even put passionate words in. You don't have to sort of be all corporate.
I think the problem is that his actual quote was what you're suggesting, Rory. I think that was the subtlety of the quote. The problem was the headline was "We will end the winning run." We are going to is the headline, but his quote was along the subtlety of "We can end the winning run,"
which would be fine. I don't have a problem. In that case, it's all media being a bunch of.
But that's what gets it up. And if Ireland did have our tweets up on the wall, as many Irish commentators have suggested.
That's where I was like,
that's just very funny to me.
Former Scotland coach Matt Williams.
That's why Johnny McGinty is not here tonight, because he is retired. No, he's just retired. I got on the front page of Irish Mirror. I'm retired. Or was that your tweet? That was.
It was my tweet.
Was it your tweet? Right.
It's hard to tell us apart. We're one voice on Twitter with that account.
You are Borg. Greg.
One night, Greg McLeod Hillier says, "How refreshing was to see on a Tia Piloto interview after the match, heart on sleeve." And there was something in that. There was a couple of Scotland players I think that did interviews after match. Sionis is the one that got the most traction. I think that was refreshing to see. I think from the Scotland team is, how much it hurt kind of guys like
Yeah.
Sione, and I think to kind of get a glimpse into that, I think that's the kind of thing that they've protected the players over in the past and maybe shut them away and not had that kind of stuff before. But I think it, they shouldn't have to do it, but I think it does let fans see how much these guys are going to be hurting after the game. I do think that largely it's not their fault. They were set out to play a game plan with that would never have beaten Ireland, with a team that weren't set up to beat Ireland either, as we've discussed. So I'm conscious of time, right? We've got 10 minutes left of the main podcast. I think what we'll do is we're going to take the whole autopsy of Scottish rugby into the Patreon, right? Because there's a lot to discuss in there. If you want to listen to that podcast, you go to patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast and you can pay £3 a month. You could just pay £3 just to hear this one podcast. Sign up for a month and then cancel it. There's lots of old bonus content you can listen to in there as well. So why not if you want the full on it's all Mark Dodson's fault rant, you're gonna have to pay for it. Pay for the privilege. What we should mention though is this weekend we have got Scotland versus South Africa. If you think international rugby is over for Scotland, no, it's not. There's more. The WXV2, Scotland women are down there. We explained last week how that works. I'm not going to go through it again, but it's Scotland, South Africa. Craig, we should explain to people maybe unfamiliar with women's international rugby that this Scotland have beaten South Africa quite well in recent years. It's not the kind of same David and Goliath battles you would expect in the men's game, but it'll be a kind of quite a strong test. I think South Africa have been putting resource into the women's game since the last game in the same way that Scotland have as well. So maybe more of a level playing field.
I would hope so. Although the Scot in me wants to see Scotland go down there and absolutely reign supreme. I think we've got the ability, and also from what we've seen over the last few games now, that the Scotland women are developing. I would expect them to really run the South Africans around a little bit with this game. But yeah, it's good to see that and this is what this WXV, 1, 2, and 3, or whatever they're going to call them, or whatever they have called them, because they're about to start. This is what this is for, and it's to get other nations game time, so that we don't end up in the same situation as men's game, where we have these tier 2 nations who aren't getting the games that they should be getting. So I think this is really a really interesting and exciting time for women's rugby and for the rugby community as a whole.
And one big thing, Rory, I think in the team announcement for South Africa, because that's come out today, is that Jade Conkle-Roberts is on the bench. I'm not sure whether she's ever started on the bench before. She may have done, but I think that probably speaks a lot to Scotland's depth now, particularly in the pack. Because Evie Gallagher, I thought had a fantastic game against Spain last weekend. So it's I'm sure Jade will be kind of relishing that challenge and having someone that's going to be pushing her for the shirt for once.
Yeah, I think looking at the teams they're playing, they've got the Scotland are currently ranked 9th, and they've got the South Africa are 12th. But the other teams that they play are Japan ranked 10th and the USA ranked 7th. So maybe they're saving Jade for what they perceive as a kind of bigger fixture. Obviously, if they could, from the post that Kevin put up, the preview up on the site today, it seems like there's 2 pools, but the pools don't ever kind of meet up. It's basically you have 2 pools of 3, and then it's just ranked 1 to 6 based on their results. So could be an odd one, but Scotland, I'm sure, would love to top that level. It doesn't necessarily give them much other than bragging rights at this stage because there's no promotion or relegation yet. But yeah, I think Lisa Thompson coming back into the team in the centre as well. Meryl Smith played really well against Spain, but again, I'm not quite sure whether that's a sort of a resting thing or whether we're going full noise to start with. You would hope that I think he said that South Africa. No, they hadn't played recently. Again, Scotland beat them fairly convincingly last time they played, but that was 4 years ago. but it was in South Africa when the girls went on like a tour, I think, or sort of mini tournament thing. So yeah, I think they'll be looking for this one to be almost like a warm up without wanting to sound too confident against any South African team at home.
But I suppose it's not something that Scotland have been able to do. I suppose going on tour as a women's team, how can have a proper tour like this as a women's team? Because traditionally, it's not one we've either not been invited or asked to go on tour. But it's this kind of, I suppose, competition that really kind of will help prepare them for the next World Cup, the next Six Nations. Being together away from home is different to kind of preparing for games competitively where you're maybe more comfortable surroundings.
Yeah, I think the thing Rory referred to was like a 2-test series in South Africa, and it was like a proper like horsing. So it seemed like almost like a training exercise, training camp. But obviously, the more intensity, the better, because the Six Nations seems to be the only competitive games they get. Obviously, there's the World Cup, which they seemed competitive. Especially the Australia game was kind of heartbreaking. But the more exposure to these high-level games, the better. But one thing that I've noticed about these is that I saw that I think it was on Welsh Women's Rugby Twitter. They were celebrating the fact that S4C had broadcast rights for their games, and that England Roses games would be available on the BBC Sport website. Scotland games, as
ITV's
I've
got
looked on
some of them, the top level WXV ones, I think.
Yeah.
Kevin's report seems to just say that ours would be on Rugby Pass TV.
Yeah.
So why haven't BBC Scotland picked it up? Or something?
It's free as far as I understand. Rugby Pass TV is free. My worry is, and I don't know if that we have the same problem as Amazon when they covered the when they got the Autumn Internationals, that because you've got coverage of the top tier on S4C and on ITV, that we get a geo-block from Rugby Pass, because Rugby Pass is only supposed to cover areas that don't have access to I knocked something over, it's fine, don't have access to the footage, so that because we're kind of dealing with UK based broadcasters, that they geo blocks from Rugby Pass. We'll see. I mean,
could they not get around that though by saying, like I assume they do with S4C, is because it's a Welsh language broadcast?
You would hope, but the England games are on ITV, so whether or not that counts, we'll see. I mean, we'll all try and log in at 3:30 on Friday and see if we can get to watch it. But there's nothing. I think I'm not even sure. And I'll check I'm just checking now before I besmirch them on this podcast, because they do listen. It does say on the Scotland Scottish Rugby website that you can follow it live on Rugby Pass TV. So you can watch it on Rugby Pass TV according to the Scottish Rugby thing. So hopefully there's no geo blocking going on, and we can see some of the clips. What'd be lovely is if there wasn't any kind of. It's the thing that worries me.
Dream about sharing them.
I was going to say Rugby Pass is owned by World Rugby, so God knows whether we can share any clips from it or not.
Surely some VPN could sponsor us.
Yeah, I think you're allowed to put it on the TikToks. TikTok seems to be immune from takedown notices. I've seen a few things shared on there, but
it's because they're in bed with World Rugby.
Possibly. Or possibly there's just so much content that they don't really know how to do TikToks.
I don't know how to do TikToks.
Well, if Jim Hamilton's running the Rugby Pass TV, as he keeps telling everyone, he'll not be able to work on the TikToks.
I think that's a fine note for us to leave it this week. Look, we'll be back with the main podcast next week. We'll cover Scotland's game against South Africa in the opening game of the WXV2. We'll maybe chat about the URC. We'll probably have a bit of a moan about what could have been if we'd been on the right side of the draw. We'll get more into the draw when we get into the Patreon. People in my mention saying that Wales would not complain about a hard draw when Warren Gatland did in 2015. Bloody cheap.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Google is your friend here, people. That took me
it's
2
not like
seconds to find that.
England and Australia were hardly like the best ever Ireland team, #1 ranked in the world.
So, and also, when as somebody pointed out, that was quite that at the time. That was still a relatively weak pool in 2015. Anyway, it's over. We're over it. That doesn't mean we're not going to still employ a
For the
Scottish
group
policy
of
for the rest of the World
mediocrity.
Cup. Yeah,
Group of death, but group of wait, you've got a wee bit of indigestion.
and if Welsh, Irish, and English fans think we're going to let up for the rest of the World Cup, they are sorely mistaken.
It's the double down
It
World
is
Cup.
the double down, don't back down, double
We're
down
gonna
World
get
Cup.
worse.
Yeah.
We are.
I have a challenge for the people
Okay.
for the Six Nations, because obviously we saw the scrap in the game, and Duhan was copping some slaggings. Now this all depends on whether or not O'Mahony retires after his 100 caps and they win the World Cup or whatever they're going to do, the shower of showers. But my challenge is by February next year, we need a slagging that Duhan can give Peter O'Mahony if he's on the pitch. Best I've come up with so far is what you'd get if you ordered Roy Keane off Wish.com. So I think that's a good start. But if anybody's got any other ones that we can, and we'll put them all to Duhan.
Peter O'Mahony, more like Peter O'Mahony. Am I right?
Nice, nice.
Eh.
You're a green fingered Roy Keane. There we go.
I was going to attack his rhubarb.
Your rhubarb sucks. It's sour. It's sour and twisted.
You call them
Peter O'Monty Don. I think
There we
yeah.
go.
I think
Title of
that's
the
Craig,
fun,
you can
but
hit me with some good
anyone
proper
picks it out,
tractor patter.
Yeah.
That's my OnlyFans site.
If anyone knows some really crap tractor brands that we can claim that Peter, that your dad drives a
yeah.
John Deere or something like that, if that's somehow an
Peter
insult, I don't know.
O'Mahony buys his tools for Tesco.
And on that note,
Your
that is
garden's full of plants that comes from the Lidl bit at the front.
Middle
of
of
Lidl.
little.
Yeah.
Nice.
There we go. Duhan, you can have
Thank you,
those for
gentlemen.
free.
Yeah.
Look, that's it for this week's main podcast. We're going to do the Patreon only pod in a moment. So if you're watching on the Patreon live stream, please hang about. But otherwise, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Craig, Ian, and Rory.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bon nuit.
Au revoir.
We're at the cup now, so aye.